Hello, people of the earth, welcome to the Front Page Fables. Today we'll dive into a hometown that doesn't even exist. But before, we called the wrong 911. Hello? Hello? Please, I need help. Jerry grasped his stomach, his face contorted in a grimace of pain. My stomach. I think I have a tummy ache. I unsuccessfully stifled a laugh. Then we were rolling around the basement, hooting and hollering. A couple hours into our smoke session, we couldn't help but try a few harmless prank calls. We exhausted our options of the local restaurants, and calling Jerry's cousin with my phone, before we got the brilliant idea to try 911, I was against it. Jerry's argument was we lived in a small town and the operators wouldn't mind a break from the boredom. He won. "Ag, my tummy," Jerry wailed. He threw his arms above his head, pretending to gasp for air. I cackled, slapping my knee. It really wasn't that funny, but we were zonked out of our minds. Jerry had flung his phone across the room during his exaggerated performance. I stumbled toward it, short bursts of laughter firing from my chest. The call was still connected. "No problem." I went to hang up. A woman's voice droned through the speaker. "We are sending someone your way." "No, wait." I brought the phone to my ear. The line disconnected. Damn it. Jerry. He was still writhing on the ground. "Jerry, I think they're actually coming." He stopped and craned his neck until he was looking at me upside down. "For real?" "Yes, dude, they said someone's coming." Jerry paused. A confused look passed over his face. "But how? We didn't even give them an address." "I think they can track that shit now." "Cap," he shook his head. "No way. That's gotta be illegal. Tracking your location." He looked at me, grasping for validation. "It's the police, not some hacker in a Starbucks." Jerry moved quickly towards the TV and plopped himself down on the couch. "Whatever, they pull up, we say wrong house." He brought up Netflix. The marijuana in my system soon scrubbed the worry from my thoughts. We sat and enjoyed the show until a dull knock from upstairs interrupted. Jerry jumped from the couch and looked at me wide-eyed. Shit. We were at Jerry's house and both in high school. His parents were out of town for the weekend, but if they heard about this, he could forget about summer break. I didn't think they'd actually come. Shit. Hide the weed. "Shut up. Relax. They'll go away after a while," I said. He was starting to really freak. There weren't any windows. His basement was completely underground. Another knock floated down the stairs. Unable to bring his attention back to the TV, he jumped in the air again. "Lights. I left the lights on upstairs." "You are an idiot." Jerry's eyes were hot red. In contrast, the situation was sobering me up. I scratched my head roughly. "All right, I think I can talk to them. Stay down here." He thanked me profusely and gave me water to chug from my breath. At the top of the steps, I looked back. Jerry gave a thumbs up and waved me on from the bottom. Like he said, the living room lights were on, and through the opaque glass of the front door, two silhouettes. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror and walked nervously toward the front. That moment with the knob in my hand, I could have made a decision that saved me from the paranoia I've suffered since. Instead, I let them in. The porch lights were off. The glow from the living room birthed uncanny shadows through the screen door onto the faces of the two outside. I waited for them to speak. Soundless and motionless, seemingly refusing to breathe. From each of their shadow-masked faces, I could only make out a wide smile with teeth dimly illuminated behind the screen. That silence was far too uncomfortable. I started. "He." "Apologies for disturbing you," one interrupted. He sounded young. It caught me off guard. Maybe it was the dark, but their smiles never moved as they talked. "There has been an emergency. We are looking for Jerry." Alarm bells started ringing. "You might have the wrong house. Sorry, sirs." I moved to close the door. We had never mentioned our real names on the call. "Jeremy." That voice sounded familiar. It was enough for me to jump away from the door as if electrocuted. One of the silhouettes outside pressed its face into the screen. "Jeremy, come here right now." "Mom," Jeremy's voice called limply from the basement. Air evacuated from my lungs. The screen door was opening. With no thoughts in my head beside to flee, to put as much distance between me and the thing coming in, I scrambled up the stairs to the second floor. It was closer than the basement, and I locked myself in a bathroom. I started to type out a text to warn Jerry. There were muffled voices from the living room. You must be Jerry. Too late. Yes. Where's my mom? She stepped outside. What seems to be the problem, Jerry? Oh, that was an accident. We butt dialed you, I think. Yes. Your friend, do you know where he is? I sent a burst of texts to Jerry. Don't trust them. Your mom's not here. Get out. Yay, I'm not sure. He was supposed to answer the door. He must have read the messages. Is everything all right, Jerry? There was a pause. Then Jerry spoke, unsure and slow. Yes. Is it okay if I step out to talk to my mom? She must be really worried. Why? Yes. I heard footsteps start before the sounds of a scuffle. Hey, what the hell? There was banging and the sounds of glass shattering. Quiet him. Good. A frantic grunting followed. The initial fear was beginning to dissolve. The urge to save my friend powered my legs. I crept down the stairs painfully, one step at a time, listening to the voices the silhouettes from the dark speak over Jerry's feeble cries. I have a rookie here with me today, so please be patient. Halfway down the stairs, the wall ended. The slowest I've ever moved was right then, creeping my head around the edge until half of one I was clear. They were facing away from me, two men in paramedic uniforms standing over Jerry. He was on the ground bound by straps with gauze shoved into his mouth. One of the paramedics with long hair knelt. He ran a hand over Jerry's face, who shook him off and yelped. Give him some monoxide. The long-haired paramedic reached into his bag and began attaching tubes to a gas canister with the big red letters CO scrawled across it. Jerry's eyes widened and he began thrashing even harder. He attached the other end to a mask and turned a valve on the canister. A hissing sound filled the room and the gas mask was forced over Jerry's mouth and nose. Hold him. After 30 seconds, Jerry's attempts to free himself noticeably weakened. Within a minute, he was unconscious. During all of this, I tried to think of someone who could help us. I didn't want to call anyone, afraid they'd hear me from where I was. My parents were asleep. Even if someone was awake, they'd probably call 911. That's what brought them here. Go ahead. Do the assessment. The paramedic directing the long-haired one was short and stocky. He turned the valve and the hissing quieted. He pointed at Jerry, signaling long hair to continue. Once again, he ran his hands over Jerry's face, then through his hair reaching behind his ears down to his neck. Long hair went over Jerry's entire body, prodding, pushing, and groping every inch of him. When he reached his toes, he turned towards his partner, flashing a grin. Nothing wrong with him. That's terrible news. What was the chief complaint? Abdominal pain. He shook his head. We missed our offering tonight. Young, healthy. This one will make up for it. Bag and tag. You'll learn a lot from him. Long hair nodded and exited the house. The stocky one rummaged through another bag and pulled out a Sharpie. He lifted Jerry's shirt and began drawing a dotted line below the navel. I can't see you. I flinched. Somehow, I knew he was talking to me. But I know you're there. I want you to know this isn't any fault of yours. Or his. This, us. You can call it coincidence. Or fate. Whichever you believe. But believe in it. He capped the Sharpie. The dotted line had become a dotted oval, stretching across Jerry's abdomen and encircling his belly button. We're here to help. Long hair walked back in with a stretcher. They quickly loaded Jerry up. He was still unconscious with the mask on him. Long hair wheeled him out the door and the other called after him. That's where you're going to cut. Get the tools ready. Then he looked into my eye. He smiled. When he spoke, he used Jerry's voice. Does your tummy hurt too? I could barely move, but shook my head. Goodbye. When the house was empty, I cried so hard I passed out. In the morning when I woke, I searched the entire house for Jerry for proof that it was all a nightmare. There was no evidence of Jerry or the paramedics. Haven't seen them since. I called the police, the real ones. The story that stuck was I woke up, and he was gone. I got a ticket for the weed. That's really it. There was nothing to prove my involvement. Nothing that could prove anything, really. Didn't just lose Jerry that day. No one talks to me. Can't even ask for homework answers anymore. All the adults try to hide their conversations about me. Not that I care much. To be honest, I'm still looking for my best friend. A week ago, it was late driving home from work. An ambulance pulled up beside me at a stop. Its lights weren't on, but I kept my foot on the brake when the traffic light turned green. I tried to get a look inside from the back window, but it was too dark to see. Just make sure that it's really an emergency when you dial that number. And if you do, make sure that it's really them. Everyone says my hometown doesn't exist. What happened to Casey Falls? Everyone says my hometown doesn't exist. I'm beginning to believe them. But that doesn't mean that was always the case. Let me back up. The first time I encountered this bizarre denial was after my first semester at college. I trekked to the Amtrak station, luggage in tow, and asked the attendant for one ticket to Casey Falls, Michigan, please. She looked up from her desk and blinked. Where? Casey Falls, Michigan, I repeated, a smidge slower this time. After she performed a search on her computer, then sought counsel from her manager, they determined that if Casey Falls was a real place, it wasn't a stop on any of their lines. How can that be? I protested. I could see its train station as clearly in my mind's eye as their bewildered faces before me. Every spring break, I took the train with my family into Chicago, boarding at 7 o'clock in the morning at the platform just east of Berry Street. Dad would hand me $2 to buy a Coke and a bag of pretzels from the vending machines before the train arrived. My younger sister Janie and I sat impatiently on the benches waiting for our journey to begin. But relaying this memory to the exasperated attendants did little to correct their system, which omitted Casey Falls from its available destinations. I spent that Christmas alone in my dorm, desperately trying to get a hold of my family, but none of them answered. Mom, Dad, sister, phone, email, text, Facebook, nothing. Even stranger was that, overnight, their online presence vanished. Erased socials, bounced emails. When I called again, a recording informed me that the numbers I was trying to reach had been disconnected. What is going on? The following 2 weeks ordinarily spent opening presents, reconnecting with high school friends, ringing in the new year were instead subsumed under my intense investigation. I scrubbed the internet for any mention of my hometown. I came up empty-handed. Despite endless hours scouring Google, Yahoo, even Bing, I found no mention of the central Michigan burg, ensconced in forest, home to Casey Falls Army Training Camp and the defunct, collapsed copper mines. Even Google Maps erased Casey Falls from its records. Where ordinarily I would see the cluster of homes and farms in Main Street, there was only a green swath of forestland. My hometown had literally been wiped off the map. Worse yet, it was beginning to disappear from my own memory. As break rolled on and my ceaseless search failed to yield a shred of evidence of my hometown's existence, I noticed my own recollection of it fading. While staring bleary-eyed at the television on New Year's Eve, watching revelers crowd Times Square to watch the Spangled Ball drop, I realized I couldn't remember any previous New Year's Eve. How had I spent them in Casey Falls? Maybe it was common to forget a few, for their memories to bleed into one another, to mix up which party went with which year, but to lose every New Year's Eve from one's personal history. I felt hollow, and in the void where Casey Falls and my preceding 18 years of memories should have been, something dark and sinister lurked. When my roommate returned in January and saw that I'd been holed up in our dorm for the entire break, he naturally inquired what happened. What happened indeed, was my mad response. Desperate for a memory of home, even if secondhand, I interrogated Sean. Surely you remember me talking about home at some point, right? I asked. And while he agreed that, surely, in our various 2 a.m. chats we must have touched on the subject, he was chagrined to admit nothing specific returned. The silver lining to this distressing chat was that I now had a partner. Sean, fascinated by my absent origin, took up the cause with me. He caught up quick, performing his own research online before arriving at the conclusion that we had to see for ourselves. So, on a weekend in late January, he drove us in his junky sedan into the heart of the mitten, to where Casey Falls should have carved out a space for itself from the surrounding forest. To my horror, We found only trees. Where Maine should have intersected with Blanchard, there was only a dirt drive reaching back into the woods. Sean didn't think his car would handle the uneven road too well, but after some pleading, he acquiesced. We drove slow along the forested road, tree branches squeezing us into a tunnel of foliage. "Right here," I said. "Casey Falls should be right here." I leapt out of the car and raced through the woods. I'm not sure why. I don't think it was rational, just my emotions taking control. A medley comprising anger, grief, confusion, fear, that propelled me through the underbrush until I tripped over something metal. I turned back to find a green box, like a geocache, resting on the forest floor. Inside, pages yellowed with age featured some sort of code scrawled across them, written with only half-decent penmanship. "What the hell is that?" asked Sean when he finally caught up to me. It was the question we tried pairing with an answer over the ensuing month. Neither of us were real code breakers, so we shopped the pages around campus, taking it to math nerds and professors in the hopes one of them might crack it. One by one, they tried their best to decipher the documents, but each one met invariably with defeat. One professor called it the toughest code she'd ever encountered, while another suggested in all likelihood the pages were rubbish. But the fact that I'd found it where my hometown should have been kept me from accepting the latter explanation. Something was written in those pages, something that helped explain what happened to Casey Falls. But I'll never uncover its secrets, because on March 3rd, someone tore our dorm room apart, and the only thing they took with them was the coded pages. Spooked by this flagrant invasion of privacy, Sean told me he would pursue the Casey Falls mystery no further. He believed that by showing the documents around campus, we'd attracted the attention of the Fed, CIA, NSA, some other three-letter agency no one had ever heard of, and now we were being watched. "Whatever happened to your hometown?" Sean said. "They don't want anyone to find out." The next week, Sean transferred out, enrolling in a school on the East Coast. He left without saying goodbye, another exit without ceremony. I've since taken a barista job to be able to stay in Chicago through the summer, since I've got nowhere else to go. While reckoning with the fact I've become an orphan, in every sense of the word, I can't help shaking the feeling that someone is watching me. Whatever happened to Casey Falls, it wasn't good. I can feel it in my bones, the unheard screams of family and neighbors vibrating in the marrow. I feel them, and it makes me sick, but I cling to the horror because it's all I have left of home. These creatures keep messing with my life, so I made the mistake of trying to kill them. I am a 79-year-old man who lives alone. I don't live a particularly lavish life, and to say the truth, I do not really care after everything I have lived through. All I want is to be able to wake up every day without being forced to my feet by recurring night terrors that have my clothes drenched in sweat and my bones threatening to shake out of their sockets. I am an Army veteran. I served in the Army for a good 25 years. I was 18 when I got packed up and shipped to serve in the Vietnam War in 1963. The things I have seen could make even serial killers do a double take. The things I have experienced are in another realm alone. I would love to just live a comfortable life and have nothing to do all day except listen to the radio and sit on my balcony, taking in the welcoming sun and caressing breeze. But I cannot. They will not let me. Ever since my wife died last year from breast cancer, everything has changed. They finally revealed themselves, those little bastards. Monsters, all around. Slimy, shadowy, creeping creatures that want nothing else but to tear out my eyes for even sparing a glimpse at them. They are everywhere. Everywhere. I do not understand why people cannot see them. Only I can. When I walk down the street, at the mall, even in my own damn home, I can't get rid of them, and it drives me halfway to insanity. I even got a dog to try and ward them off, a German Shepherd. Vicious little thing it is. Fur as dark as dirt and eyes that seem to see. Analyze. Everything watches me. Even my own damn dog. My family is coming over today. It is my birthday. At least that is what they said. Sometimes the monsters like to mess with my calendar and move my keys and belongings around. I will scour my whole house to find where they have placed my stuff. My radio, most of all. Bastards always love hiding it and laughing while I desperately tear my house apart from ground to ceiling searching for it. Curious thing is it's always on my balcony where I frequently sit and listen to on it. I just can't seem to remember. They just enjoy watching me struggle. I am getting off topic. My family is coming over today. It is my birthday. I have a beautiful daughter, a pesky son-in-law, and an even lovelier niece. Unfortunately, my wife passed from breast cancer last year. They are my joy in this darkness of a life. I need to make sure everything perfect. Perfect for them. I grabbed my cane and let out a small grunt as I pushed to my feet, slowly pacing over to my kitchen island. I sigh, looking at the multitude of papers scattered like leaves over a driveway on my table. One arm propped over my cane, I begin sorting through them. Bills, bills, bills. Prescription for something called Donepezil. HM. Can't seem to recall that. I toss them all in my garbage, not bothering enough to go to the garage and place them in the recycling. That's when I notice it. One of them. A snarling, mangled creature, hunched over my kitchen floor. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat and threatening to choke me like ghastly hands wrapped around my neck. The thing was medium-sized and brown, almost as dark as dirt. Blood leaked out of its jaw, gaping white eyes staring at me from behind a bloodied snout. It was horrifying. Limbs far too long for its stubby body, and bent at various, painful angles as to accommodate its form. They looked pale brown, a soft layer of what could be comparable to the hairs of a spider up close covering its body. I let out a small curse and grabbed my cane, slamming it against the creature's body once. The thing let out a whimper, almost like an animal begging for mercy. Mercy for a monster. It was almost laughable. The pathetic being let out an almost inaudible growl and stalked backwards, its limbs twisting and turning at angles like cogs in a clock to push it back. I used that opportunity wisely. I hobbled over to my living room before slamming the closet door open with so much force, I was surprised the door didn't come of its hinges. That's what years in the military and a junk load of adrenaline does to you. I looked inside and snapped my head from side to side, searching for the one thing I needed. My shotgun. I was sure I left it here. Certain, even. But if I am honest, I cannot remember the last time I had used it. I let out a flurry of curses. Damned creatures. They must have moved it as a pitiful attempt of a joke. I stumbled to my room, willing my feet to move faster, harder, quicker. The creature ran to me, nipping at my heels just as I turned the corner straight to my room and whacked the door shut with all my might. My gun. I need my shotgun. I frantically paced around the room, overturning pillows and crashing lamps in my craze to find it. Where is it? Where is my shot? Ah, there it is. A beauty? I pushed myself over using my cane and grabbed a hold of it. Even after so many years, the indent of where my hand placement is and the steady feel of the cool metal against my fingers is more than enough to ground me. To give me the confidence I need to kill whatever that thing behind my door is. I roll my shoulders and let out a small sigh before whistling. Archie, Archie, come here, I call out. My dog's name is Archie. Or was it Max? Maybe Archie was the last one. I listen for the telltale sound of scratching footsteps coming my way before taking a deep breath. Good. Archie Max dog. Dog will be a good sacrifice. Better him than me. Or was it a girl? I wait until the footsteps stop in front of my door before slamming it open and aiming at the deformed monster still perched in front of my bedroom door. Blood coated its unhinged jaw. It had eaten my cat. A well-sacrifice, all in all. Not giving myself a moment's leeway, I cocked the shotgun and fired off, straight between the animal's hollow eyes. Bang! For a moment I swear I saw something like betrayal flash through the being's eyes. But monsters are not capable of anything of the sort. It fell to the ground in a pool of its own miserable blood, left to die an equally miserable death. Good. Perfect. Amazing. I killed it. I killed one of them. I cannot be defeated. Now I get it. Now I get it all. I am the only one capable of seeing these monsters because I am the only one able to kill them. I have a duty bestowed on me. An honorable one I will take without hesitation. These things are nothing more than pathetic creatures trying and failing to mimic our life forms. I can do this. I am the chosen one. Knock, knock, knock. I look over to my front door. Another knock, this one louder. If knocks could have emotions, this one would portray panic. Kicking the still bleeding monster aside, I grabbed my cane and sauntered over to the front door, my cane hitting the ground with a rhythmic thump. I cock my shotgun again. Better safe than sorry. And I open the door. Another monster. This one much taller than the one I just killed. If I can put a gender to it, I would say it be female. It is wearing a blue floral dress, much like the one I bought for my daughter for her birthday last year. Unfiltered rage consumed me. Had this beast killed my daughter and come here to do the same to me? Me. Ha! As if I can allow that. I aim the shotgun at the beast's heart, or where I assume its heart would be. Fear, betrayal, and sadness all flicker over the thing's face. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe they do have some semblance of emotion. I don't care either way. Bang. And the creature falls to the ground, bleeding the same as the last one did. A cry filled of pure rage and agony assaults my ears, and I look over to find another creature, this one appearing to be male, sprinting over to the body of the person I just killed. Wait, person. No. Monster. I have one last shell. Cock shotgun. Aim. Right in the middle of his chest. A certain shot. He looks too human in this moment. And fire. He collapses to the floor, immediately lifeless like the other two. I don't feel victory. I feel pain. So much pain. But why? Grandpa? A small, child voice calls out. I slowly look over and come face to face with my niece, standing above the corpse of her. No, it is not possible. Mom! Dad! She screams. No, it is not real. They are monsters. I am helping. They are man-eating creatures, so why? Why are those the bodies of my niece's parents? I was in a war and saw something I shouldn't have. To start off, my name is Indrell Forder, and I was a part of the 14th Regiment of the United States Alliance in World War II. It was a brutal war in many ways more than one, although the terrors of unnecessary bloodshed and countless deaths of those who I knew personally are no light memory. There was something about that war and what I was involved in that I to this day cannot put my finger on. I do apologize if the details are fuzzy as even I cannot recall everything by pure details. Maybe that's the thing your brain does when you experience something that it doesn't understand. I was born in Massachusetts to a local humble family. We had our place in our town, and that was all I asked for. After World War I, everyone was convinced that was the end of the bloodshed that those monsters across the water seemed to love oh so much. I had a few friends, but I didn't really have any memorable enough to recall. As my 18th birthday was inching closer, we heard the terrible news of talks of World War II breaking out. All I could do was hope otherwise. Unfortunately, hope didn't get me anywhere. I was drafted to boot camp the second week I turned 18 years old. It was pure hell. They were ruthless in our training, and they treated us like we were already in a war zone. 6 hours of sleep, if any, and the food was terrible too. Almost every single time we had PT, 1 or 2 people passed out from it. Sometimes I was one of those people too. There was one good thing about boot camp, though. I made friends. Roger Fenrel, Jensen Saren, and Cordell Soraya, among a few others, but they were the main guys who I always stuck with. I originally met them at chow time, which was the few minutes we got of grace, which once again, if any, if the drill sergeants were feeling nice that hour. They stuck to me like sap to a tree. So much, in fact, we had to get separated numerous times by the sergeant for being combative and disruptive. I loved those guys, and to this day of writing my story, I still want to meet up with them and sit around a campfire to just talk about our lives now and what we wished it could have been. Roger was a fairly short man, probably around 5'7", brown-haired man, if I remember correctly. He was born in Utah to also get drafted just like I did. Jensen was a taller blonde man who was stuck up when we first met, but got to enjoy our company as a group. Lastly, Cordell was a black fellow whose family was from an eastern country called Senegal. I was always interested in his culture, but he never got into it as it was a touchier subject for him. I've heard of what happened to the Africans prior to me being born, so I knew not to dig him for it. Those guys made boot camp a little more tolerable, but fuck, it was still one of the worst things I've ever had to go through in my life. We were lucky enough to become part of the same regiment and get stationed in the same place. Regiment 14 of the United States Alliance, and we were shipped off to some part of France named Dunkirk. It was about as awful as I expected. Shouting, guns, explosions, wounded, and about everything you think a war scene from one of those new, non-fiction movies portrays. The barracks we slept in were dirty, and as pungent as a mudhole I used to play in as a kid. As we were allowed to only take personal belongings with us when we were shipped off. I took a small German to English dictionary to try and learn the language of the freaks we hear so much about. It almost did not feel real being there. This type of atmosphere is impossible to convey through writing, but it was horrific being anywhere. I was hoping that I wouldn't be deployed into the field. I didn't know if I could handle that. On the other hand, Jensen was about as ready as ever. He took with him a bullet casing from a Mauser pistol. It had a story. His father was in World War I. He was in a gunfight, and he bent down to pick up the casing as it was shiny, and before he knew it, grabbing the casing, a bullet whizzed past his head, or where it would have been if he didn't go to grab the casing. So to this day, it's dubbed their family's lucky bullet. I thought that maybe if I was round him enough, maybe I'd start feeling that way too, and to some extent, I did. I felt as if nothing could touch us or break us apart. Me, Jensen, Cordell, and Roger. And unfortunately, that was one of the last times we as a group felt undying. The next morning, we woke up to silence everywhere, as if the war had seemingly ended the same night. We went to bed prior. That's what I'd hoped for at least. Right before our commander of the regiment came screaming into the barracks as if his life depended on it. Get up, soldiers, we need to reposition immediately, we need to go now. We jumped out of bed as a cacophony of shuffling shoes and yelling arose from the silence of the moonlight above. Before I knew it, we were all outside. All I could hear was the engines of our old infantry vehicles starting up. Our commander ordered us to get into them with no questions asked. It was a little hard not to ask anyone, but I had to do what I was told. We left everything that wasn't an immediate necessity. Luckily, I had my dictionary in my backpack, so I had that with me. I was looking around for Jensen, Cordell, and Roger, and I found them loading up into the barracks vehicles across from me. We made eye contact, or more of a, what the absolute fuck is going on type look to each other. As I was going to sit down, the truck darted off, leaving a huge trail of mud behind it. I don't know what the hell caused them to act like this, but I probably didn't want to know. We drove, for miles, seemingly for hours too. It was so hard not to ask what made us rush out of our main barracks so quickly. But nobody had a clue. Only the commander probably knew, but as I said earlier, no questions asked. We all eventually gave up the endeavor of trying to figure out what was happening and sat in silence, just listening to the roar of the collective engines of our trucks. After all, this is a war. Anything could have happened. After about 2 hours of silent driving, we stopped. Seems like we drove all the way to the beach, one of the soldiers up front said. Why the hell would we need to go to the beach? Maybe they were surprising us with a holiday, jokingly. Get out and place all your things on the ground. We're searching everyone. I don't care what your rank is or who you are. Everyone. The voice I just heard was Base Admiral Peter Forts. He was one of the people we heard of in debriefing before we were brought here. I listened, obviously. We all filed out of our trucks and placed our things on the ground in front of us. There had to have been around 150 men. This was probably going to take a while. They finally got to me and pulled out my dictionary. He leaned in closer and said quietly, "As soon as everyone's bags are checked, come see me." I quietly nodded, and he moved on to the next person. 20, maybe 25 minutes passed before he was done checking everybody. As I headed off to meet with Peter, it seemed I was the only one. I arrived at his tent and let myself in. "Good. You're here?" he said and ushered me into one of the chairs in the middle of the tent. He held up the dictionary and said, "So, I understand that we are pit against the Germans, but why would you need to communicate with them? It's not like we're taking any of them prisoner in this section." "Well, I just wanted to be able to know what they're saying. You never know what they could be planning," I said back. "You understand you're currently being questioned under suspicion of being a German spy, don't you?" he said in return. I was bewildered. I simply just nodded and said, "I assumed as much. Yes, Admiral." "Good. We can continue then," he replied. He asked me questions like, "Can you sing the United States national anthem?" And, "What is the capital of Washington, D.C.? I understood that was a trick question and replied, "Sir, there isn't one." Once again, he nodded and continued with the questioning. Finally, when I thought we were done, he said, "One more question and you can go. Do you know why your regiment had to reposition?" "No, sir. I was wondering if I could know," I replied. He looked at me with stern eyes and said, "No, soldier, some things are best left to the imagination. After all, whatever you may be thinking, it's probably better than what it actually is. That response left me wondering more than I already had been. He pointed to the direction of the exit of the tent. I swiftly left, leaving nothing behind besides the tension of our conversation. I walked back to our barracks to meet up with Roger, Jensen, and Cordell. It's been about 2 days of nothing. No bombs going off, no running of soldiers around the camp, nothing. It was almost unnerving. It seemed as if the war was over. In less than a week, everything has changed. It was worrisome. Nobody has any clue what in the hell was going on either. I was about to go to the Admiral myself and damn near demand an answer. I was resting in my bed as our regiment commander called a group towards him. Soldiers of the 14th Regiment, we are hereby ordered to return to our original base camp as it's been confirmed by our scouts that it's once again safe to inhabit. Inhabit? I thought to myself, that doesn't sound like anything they'd usually say. We all shambled back to our infantry vehicles to get ready to re-enter the grounds of war. I hated to think about it, but I was a little excited. The loss of words I've been at the past few days was so boring that I wished we were back near the front lines. As we returned towards our old encampment, I got a good look at it. Everything was as it was when we left originally, besides one glaring difference. There were these goopy black puddles of water on the group all over the area. The vehicles parked up around our tents, and our commander ushered us out. We got out and awaited instructions. From here on out, no one will be allowed to exit the premises and a curfew will be in place. 21 Oza will be the time every soldier is required to be in their tents, and no matter what, you will not go anywhere after hours without supervision of a superior officer. I hope that is clear for you all. No, we will be deployed to the front lines later in the week, so I trust you will all be prepared for that. Now get back to your tents. Jesus Christ, this is worse than I ever could have imagined. I'm terrified. There's his blood everywhere. Before today, didn't even know a human body could live without that much blood. There's gunfire everywhere and artillery going off from both sides of this war. The world has never felt as dark as it is right now. The sun still shines, but it feels as if there was nothing at all. I was laying in a trench when I hear yelling of Germans in the distance. It sounded like something along the lines of, "We will move, ready, 4 minutes." I rushed to find our superior officer, but hell, I didn't even know who to report to. I ran around until I was lost. I couldn't recognize anything. I was in some sort of trench that I didn't recognize on the layout of the land we were supposed to be in. It looked like no one has passed through here in months. This didn't make sense as the fight has only been going on for a couple of weeks. It was quiet here. The only things I could recognize were German books and papers everywhere. I wanted to make some sense of it, so I walked up to one of the journals on the ground and attempted to decipher what I could. Black, non-human, kill, uncontrolled. What the fuck? I thought to myself. I know my translations were a little spotty, but even this didn't really make any sense. I kept reading to try and figure out what it meant. Although I knew for a fact that I was alone, I felt watched, uneasy and almost horrified, yet there was nothing to cause these emotions. The world felt as if it was closing in on me by the second. I didn't want to move or make any sound at all, to the point where I held my breathing. I started to hear footsteps from around the corner of the dugout I was in. I raised my gun in preparation for performing an act I'd never hoped to have to do. I stood there for so long I could feel my muscles tense up, but I did not want to take any risks. There was no way I could hear these footsteps for this long and not know where it was coming from, but somehow I couldn't put my finger on it. As I was going to lower my gun, I saw it. The source of the steps. It was not anything that I could ever in my life have imagined. It was tall, way too tall to be a human. It was stark black to the point that it seemed that no sunlight could touch it. And it had wavy tentacle-like arms, 4 of them. As I saw it, I wanted to die. Every emotion and nerve in my body felt as if it wanted to end. It stood in front of me, not making any moves besides the arms of it flowing in the air. It just stared at me. I think it could sense my utter fear and wanted to bank on that. The tiny slit eyes it possessed were looking at me and felt as if it was staring into my very soul. It made a hand motion with its long, slender fingers, which seemed like it wanted to put my gun down. So that's what I did. If something like this on a battlefield has survived for this long, I could assume bullets won't affect it. It came closer to me, leaving small puddles of black goop in its path. As I still was petrified, I could move or react to its movement at all. I blinked, and it was in front of my face. I felt like I'd fallen into a pit so deep there was no escape or any sanctuary of sunlight. It just stared. Less than a few inches from my face it stood. Suddenly I felt like I was safe, which made absolutely no sense at all considering I'm currently standing face to face with an otherworldly being that could most likely kill me whenever it pleases. I almost wanted to hug it, but before I made any moves it reached out its arms and grabbed hold of me. I started screaming and flailing my arms to try and get it off me, but there was no use. It must have had the strength of 100 men as I could do nothing to stop it. As I reached for my knife, I heard a voice yelling out for me. "Indral, hey, it's Roger. I saw you running, and we followed. We're all here." The entity stopped instantly and put its finger onto my forehead. "You are a friendly man. I am happy you showed sympathy towards me. You may live." It felt like it was speaking directly into my mind. It faded away like smoke off a gun on a windy day. I fell to the floor, unable to move or make any sound at all. With my face in the dirt, I hear muffled screams not too far from me. I wiped it off and made my best attempt to get up. As I stood up, I started running. As I turned the corner from where the voices came from, I saw it. Everyone, all of them dead. Jensen, Roger, Cordell, face down. I ran to them as fast as I could with no awareness of it that thing could still be here. I slapped them and shook each and every one of them to try to hopefully wake them up, but to no avail they did not. I was torn. Crying into the jacket of Jensen, I wanted myself to die along with them. After about 5 minutes of pure crying, I stood up and dusted myself off. I took his lucky bullet. I went back and picked up my gun. I worked my way back to where I thought I came from. To this day, the memory of it all still eats me away as the guilt runs strong along with it. I wish I could have done something, anything to keep my friends alive. As I said in the beginning of all of this, I just wish to sit down around a campfire with them one more time and talk about what we would have done together if we all made it out alive.